We talked briefly about neurofeedback as a preliminary assessment and treatment evaluation process. And basically, what happened is we received a generous amount of funding from the Niagara Community Foundation to have a look at our assessment process, see how we could refine it, and see how we could also continue to evaluate treatment. And we've paired that together with some neurofeedback treatment, and we received a little bit of funding from both Rotary as well as Maycourt, which allowed us to incorporate a treatment component. So it's been pretty small scale because the goal of it is to get a sense of how does neurofeedback accelerate the treatment outcomes, or how does it help to enhance the work that we're doing. And our next step goal would be to apply for funding to have everybody trained in our center to do the neurofeedback and get hopefully a machine of our own, because they're quite expensive and we're renting one currently. But this is really leading edge work as well as research. And it's typically something that's only available to people with lots of money because you're paying for it, right? And I think that the clients that we work with through the nonprofit don't have the opportunity to access this, but boy, do they ever need it. So it's such a privilege to be able to offer this. And I'm grateful to our board for being so receptive to it and helping to write the grants that got us the funding. But these two analyses that you see here, we're currently tracking this with all of our clients. The difference is there's neurofeedback clients and non-neurofeedback clients. So for people who are just doing treatment alone, we'll have the ability to look at their progress from session to session and see how they're progressing in this kind of graph format, which is nice to be able to look at and share back with our funders in a report in a non-identifying way. But it's also nice for me clinically and for the client to be able to get a sense of where am I now in comparison to when I started. So both of the ones that I'm showing you today were a combination of neurofeedback as well as treatment, because that's what I've been doing with most of my clients, because there are only 2 staff and one student that are currently trained in the neurofeedback. So this is just another example similar to the one that we saw earlier. And this client is actually no longer in session. So she did 11 sessions and has completed treatment with her trauma symptoms falling into the normative range. So that's really lovely. And that's such a blessing to be able to see happen. So, but everybody's journey and progress is a little bit different based on their experiences. And
Laura,
then,
can I just interject for a moment? The reason, I mean, it's very helpful for the clinicians to have the data, but as board members, one of our driving goals is that somewhere down the road, we should get mental health dollars from the provincial government. And this is the kind of data, the concrete stats that we need. And so that's why we applied for that particular grant. So anyway.
Yeah. And it's neurofeedback, for those of you that don't know, basically is if you've ever had like an ECG done where they put the little stickies on and they measure your heart, this is actually measuring brain waves. So little electrodes go on the scalp in certain areas. Different part of our brain is responsible for different functions, like even motor functions. So the example Jennifer gave us earlier, drastic shifts, if I can share, Jennifer, like at times she would come in with visible stuttering and difficulty walking and mobility and the seizures. And in a half an hour neurofeedback session, her body would like reset. And she's like, I want one of these machines at home. And I wish I could give her one of those machines, but they're very expensive. I want one at home too. But it's just quite remarkable what it can do. And the idea of it is it's not actually stimulating anything, but you're targeting different parts of the brain. And for trauma, and this is infra-low neurofeedback, which is specifically geared towards trauma, we're targeting calming and stabilization. So stabilization between hemispheres, because trauma disrupts integration between the right and the left hemisphere, or between the body and the mind and the brain. And then we're stabilizing, or we're focusing on calming. So those brain regions are helping to re-regulate the nervous system at a very deeply subconscious level. And all it's doing is when we pick the brain brain regions that we're putting the electrodes on, it's like holding up a mirror to the brain. They're playing games or watching TV or YouTube, and basically the electrode will transmit the brainwave activity to the screen, which then feeds that back. So if you're watching a nature scene, for example, it might get cloudy, or the screen might get smaller, or the sound might fade out, and people will try to consciously control it, myself included. You can't. It's not a conscious control thing. But what happens is our brain learns, oh, when I do more of this, I get more of this. And so it's responding and changing those brainwave patterns, which with trauma, ADHD, stress, we see there's decreased cohesion between our brainwaves. I usually have an image that I show of this, and I didn't put it in this slide. I use it for training. But basically, the brainwaves are less coordinated with individuals who've experienced trauma. And there's also what's called a core downward slope, which kind of looks like, well, actually, this is a great example of cohesion, actually, right here on your slide. See how the brainwaves are, or these aren't brainwaves, but if they were brainwaves, this would show you, when they're not coordinated together, there's big gaps between them. When they are coordinated together, they're close together and they're following the same kind of pattern. And what is called a core downward slope, there often with learning is this really defined kind of peak, reverse peak. And that's information processing. And with people who've experienced trauma, we see a lot of gaps with that, which is why a lot of times people struggle to learn from experience, because that information processing or that core downward slope is not working as optimally as it could be. Silvana? Yeah.
How do you know who of the clients that you should be using this machine on?
Well, it really is safe for anybody, but I would say anybody that could benefit from it. And I have thought of you. I definitely have thought of you, but it is in person only. So if it's something you're interested in, I'm sure we can sort it out. But you would have to be able to get to the office.
Oh, I'll get
That's
there.
been a challenge. Okay, so send a message, because I do think it would be really good for you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So, but it is in person because it's a physical equipment. So. And it's still about an hour session by the time we hook people up, take the electrodes off, take the paste out of their hair, all of that stuff. But it's pretty cool. So yeah, awesome. Any other questions about that before we continue? Cool. And this is something I've wanted to do, by the way, for over a decade, but it's very expensive. So it's pretty amazing to be able to offer it and get some preliminary research.
And it is trauma specific.
Yeah.
It isn't neurofeedback that you would get in another setting.
Yeah. So, which is really, it's targeting the very low, slow brain waves, which is what happens with with trauma. We see an increase in slow wave activity in the frontal lobes, which our frontal lobes are involved with our executive functions and so many different things, starting doing something, stopping doing something, staying on task, and obviously learning and emotional regulation ties in there. So now